Keep in mind that every family is going to interpret this information differently, and that's okay, depending on your family history and life experiences and people that you know. All of that is going to impact how you feel and how you think about this, and that's okay. And so that's why it's important to gather that information and also do the research before making your decision. Getting pregnant and giving birth are two of the most exciting things you can ever hope to experience in this life. The moment you think you could be pregnant, you're frantically searching for all the best information, which is why you're here today. I'm Stephanie King, and with my many years of experience as a professional childbirth educator, doula, and lover of all things pregnancy, birth, and postpartum, I'm here to make preparing for your birth enjoyable, empowering, and totally easy. Each week, I'll cover different topics, interview professionals, and get into the nitty-gritty birth stories from mamas just like you. And when you're ready for more, you can join me in the My Essential Birth course at myessentialbirth.com, where I take you step by step through exactly how to prepare your mind, body, spirit, and partner for a birth you love. So let's get started. Before we dive into this week's topic, let me give a shout out to this reviewer of the week. This week it is Nahycnil. Nicenil. I'm totally butchering that. I'm so sorry. She says, must listen. This podcast and birth course has helped me overcome the anxiety I had after my first birth that was filled with interventions. With all the information this podcast offers and the birth course, I was empowered and was able to have an unmedicated, amazing birth experience with my second. So grateful for the My Essential Birth course and the Pregnancy and Birth Made Easy podcast. I'm obsessed with all things pregnancy and postpartum now. Welcome to the club. For those of you that are here, maybe you're listening in, you haven't had that baby yet, or you haven't utilized this information yet. Careful. It is a slippery slope. We joke about it all the time. It leads into all kinds of other things, but it does leave you a little bit obsessed with pregnancy and birth. So excited that you guys are here listening. Today's topic is definitely a hot topic. I try not to avoid these kinds of things, but I also want to come to you with really good information. Because we are talking about such a hot topic, today we will be talking about vaccines. Know that I do my very best to give very unbiased, both side information, and I know my job is done, or I've done it well, if you have no idea which way I lean. That said, I cannot and will not go into all of the details of every single vaccine, whether that's during pregnancy or with baby or whatever. That wouldn't even be a good use of my time, because the goal here is to help you know how to educate yourself, truly. You should absolutely come here for information that you can take with you, and I think that is so important. But the truth is that these kinds of decisions are they're so important for us to make on our own, and they are for us to trust our intuition and to work on knowing how to research things in such a way that we have both sides of the story so that we can make very educated and informed decisions. That is always the goal with what I do here. And it's what has been so useful to me. I love that I get to teach and talk to you guys about all these things, but it's like teaching you to fish, right? I can either bring you a fish and show you what it looks like and tastes like and all of that, and you can eat, and that can be great. Or I can show you how to get that information for yourself so that you consistently know how to be able to find information, fill yourself with knowledge, and make good decisions for your family. With that, since I know this can be a quite divisive topic, I just want to remind everybody listening that we're all going to have our own opinions. You may or may not agree with what is said here, and you may or may not agree with somebody else. Chances are you are going to butt heads with somebody about this at some point. And so I would just ask that you keep an open mind and an open heart, and remember that we're all on our own motherhood and parenting journey, and we're all trying to make the best decisions for our children with how we feel. And that I personally totally respect that of every single mother. I don't believe any mother out there, whether she chooses to vaccinate or not vaccinate, either herself or her children, is doing it in a way that is meant to harm either herself or her children. And I know that as I say that, the reality of that hopefully sinks in for everyone else, that is very much the truth. So keep that in mind. Now, I also want you to know it's a safe place to come and chat about these things. So yes, we post about this kind of stuff on our Instagram and other social media channels. We talk about it within our private Facebook group. So far, everybody has been extremely respectful. And so as long as the conversation goes that way and you can actually ask for and receive opinions back and forth that help you, then that is a positive thing. But again, if we post about this week or any other week and we get some really negative, bashing, that kind of comment, they will be deleted. So I'm just going to give you a heads up right there. We really don't ever have to do that. It's very, very rare. But with that, let's kind of dive in. So first and foremost, as I kind of started with, I'm not here to tell you what to do. This is really about you understanding how to make good decisions for your family. And I want to include where to find accurate information in order to do that. That way you have the knowledge and the places to go to make those informed decisions. I also want to chat really quick about where not to find information. Some of you might already know this, and it might be a duh, right? Social media. There is good. Of course, there are going to be factual, excellent things that you can find on social media. It is also muddy waters, okay? And knowing that, just keep that in mind as you are scrolling through different things and reading other people's opinions, even on what seem like educated posts, that you still get to make the decision for you and your baby. And you know that I talk about that all the time with all decisions that happen during pregnancy and birth, that as long as you were in charge of it, people are going to have their opinions. You still get to make that decision, even when it doesn't seem right to somebody else. Even when all of the evidence and everything else seems to be backing it in a specific way, you still have mother's intuition. You know your body and your baby best, period. Nobody in the world gets to have that information except for you. There's nobody that's going to come close to it. And so you get to make those decisions. Along with that, as mothers, we also have to hold the weight of whatever a decision I just made. Now I have to carry the responsibility of that. And that is always the tricky part of being a mom. So it's very powerful. And we have to do it with confidence, because we will make decisions that we felt so inspired to make, and we can slip up, or we don't understand the reason that we felt that way because things went a different way. And that's okay. It's part of life. You're not meant to be perfect. And so keep that in mind as you're weeding through information and making decisions for yourself. I will tell you personally that my decision making for my children has grown and changed over time. And I know that there will be people that say that's exactly why you have to do it this way, because you can't play around with your children's health and all of that kind of stuff. And you know what? I disagree. And I don't want to say that in obviously your children's health is the most important thing ever, but we have to have grace for ourselves in this life, period. You just have to. You have to understand you're going to screw up. You're going to make mistakes. You're going to go back and wish you had changed things or made them a little bit different. But as long as you are trying and you are moving forward, that's what this life is about. That is my 2 cents right there. Anyway, so when you're looking on social media and things like that, don't take anything as an absolute. Keep that in mind. And then the other place that I will caution you 100 times over to not go is any moms groups, particularly online. It's harder to have conversations in moms groups in person where you're being extremely outright rude to somebody. But behind a computer screen, people let loose in the nastiest of ways. And I don't know why it happens in moms groups, because you would think we're all coming together. We're here to support and love each other. Fine, even if you have opinions and you're offering good information in that way to be encouraging of your opinion because you think it will be helpful to a mother, fine. But the way that it gets displayed in those groups, not my favorite. The other thing to keep in mind too, so reaching out to friends and family might be really helpful. Now, if you're a more crunchy mom and you have a very medical family or medically minded friends, you guys are going to clash on some things. I don't think that's a bad thing. I think it's totally useful and helpful to be able to talk to people that have differing opinions, provided it's done respectfully, so that you can hear both sides. It's the only way you're going to learn. So they will have their opinions and experiences in their lives, in their medical professional fields, that are going to have a say or a part of why they feel the way that they feel. And I think that's totally valid and totally useful for you to hear. Just likewise, if you're more medically minded and the other are crunchy, I recommend that you listen. You're going to talk to people that have vaccine-injured children or have had poor outcomes from vaccines or other things that have happened. And it would be useful and worth your time to listen to that information. If there's something I've learned over the years, definitely as a parent, but also into my adulthood, I'm currently learning this lesson right now. More information is what is needed to make good decisions. So good information is how you make good decisions. It happens no other way. And if you don't take the time to go get the information, how are you going to make a decision? So keep that in mind. We actually do have an example of a good social media site or Instagram, actually. It's at just the inserts. And you can go and look there. It is supposedly, right, straight inserts from the CDC. So you can always double check that and be able to look back and forth. I'm not saying that information is perfect in all of its regard. I'm saying as far as social media goes, they are copying and pasting inserts. So if you need a place to look at them quickly, that would be a place to go. And certainly the inserts are definitely one of the places that I recommend that you look because they have all kinds of information on the vaccine and its side effects and what to look for and percentages of all kinds of things. And then they should also include that number, right? The fact sheets that we're looking at, they also have a number in case you do run into some kind of allergy or reaction or something like that so that you can report it appropriately and also bring yourself or baby back to your provider to get treatment. Now, good places to look. Let's talk about that. So, vaccine inserts straight from the manufacturer. So CDC has their fact sheet and all of that information. There are, for every vaccine, there are different manufacturers. Think of it as a brand, like Kellogg's or Pantene Pro-V, or right? Everything has a brand, a mother person that made them. And so each one of them is made a little bit different. The ingredients and the percentages of ingredients will be a little bit different. And the information from that particular manufacturer will be a little bit different. So you would call your pediatrician and say, hi, I know that my baby is due for Hep B, Tdap, and whatever else. I would like to know which manufacturer you use for these. And then you can ask, get that information and then look up those direct manufacturer inserts. So I would recommend doing that. Another place to look is PubMed articles. And you guys, a lot of my research is done using Google and not Dr. Google. I go and find studies and I don't just find one, I find many. And so even just typing into Google, whatever hepatitis B vaccine inserts, that's one way you can go and grab that stuff. Hepatitis B in newborns, side effects, risks, whatever. And then you start looking, you start doing some research. You start pulling all of the PubMed articles or the .gov stuff, or, you can end up in all kinds of places, but they should be legitimate, CDC, NIH, actual study evidence-based places where you can go and look at large studies and read on these things about side effects and all kinds of stuff. Now, there are forums out there. I know, for example, Baby Center has all kinds of forums did you get vaccinated for the flu, or pregnant 2024 vaccines, or whatever it is. Sometimes those can be helpful if you're looking for experiences that people have had. However, it can turn into a rabbit hole, and it can, since it is so opinion and you don't have their medical background and you can't weigh it against other things, it's okay, that is a piece of information. This is not, full evidence-based, scientific, whatever. But don't discount people's experiences either. I would say especially personal experiences with people that those would be the ones that I would say to look at. But you have to be careful out there because, well, we all know. It just, rabbit hole can take you very far. And the last thing you want to start doing is second guessing yourself in everything that you're doing and not trusting your intuition and the knowledge that you have from evidence-based sources with this kind of stuff. But certainly everybody in our lives has had experience with vaccines one way or another. And so once you start talking about it, the information does come. So the other thing that you can do, and I have done this myself. Again, just good decisions are based off of good information. I have gone to different conferences. I don't even know that I would really call them conferences in my area, but like meetings where a midwife has had, they have like a gamut of people come in. In fact, I've even been a presenter at this where they'll have somebody like come and talk about doula work and birth education and belly binding and chiropractic care and fertility. And like they bring in all of these different kinds of specialists. And oftentimes they will bring in people who have also had vaccine injured children and they will share their story. Again, I think it's important to hear. So that's an option too, just a local to you location that offers some different things where you can get information about these. Oftentimes they bring in a pediatrician as well, somebody that can talk about that stuff. Sometimes there will be OBs there that also talk about those things, all including vaccines. So I would look for local things like that as well. I think it's always great if you can get your hands on and ask questions directly to the professionals that deal with this stuff and the moms that are going through it. So that is my take on that. Now, I know that this seems like a lot. And so let's start with what vaccines are being recommended. And no, I am not going to go, as I said, list by list, but I think just starting with understanding what is being recommended. Now, if you're pregnant, there will be certain recommendations for you to get during your specific pregnancy. And then there will be things that are offered to your baby directly, immediately postpartum, and then in the coming weeks postpartum for baby. So ask what vaccines are being recommended. Remember that you should be looking for a pediatrician before you give birth. You want to be on the same page with them, not just for vaccines, but for general, this is how I choose to raise my baby or feed my baby or treat my baby. Like, let's make sure you and I are on the same page. Because if you're not, just like your provider now, you guys are going to be butting heads, but now it's about your child. And trust me, you don't want to have to mama bear in the middle of a pediatric appointment because you guys don't agree. So make sure that you're doing that before. And then you ask what is recommended, which I will include the CDC schedule for you guys in the link just so that you can see what is recommended for all here in the United States. It doesn't mean you need to follow it. You absolutely get to choose, but I will show you what they do recommend. And then you can ask things like, are these combo vaccinations, right? For example, we've got the Tdap or the DTaP, depending on how old your child is. And you can get some of those separate. You can get tetanus separate. You can even wait to have tetanus if that's what you decide to do. But you wouldn't know that if you didn't know that you could ask. And so you have to ask for those kinds of things. Again, you're asking for that manufacturer. Let me see what kind it is. There are some vaccines that have extra things in them and others that don't. So all that stuff is what you need to be talking with your provider about. The other thing is, yes, you can ask for that separately, but your pediatric office may or may not offer it. And they may or may not charge you extra if they do, because often they are more expensive to get the single dose because it's not something that they regularly do or that's regularly offered. So keep that in mind. The other thing that you'll probably want to go over with your pediatrician, provided that you want to do something different than the CDC schedule, is asking them for a delayed schedule, one that they recommend, or are they fine with you doing a delayed schedule however you would like to do it, or are they fine with you not vaccinating? And what I mean by are they fine with that is literally there are pediatricians that will not take your children unless they are fully vaccinated or unless they are vaccinated in a certain way by a certain time, even on a delayed schedule. And so that for somebody who is wanting to just vaccinate how they want to vaccinate, that could be something that really important to you. And so it's worth it to call around and ask those kind of questions before you even step foot in the office, before you even worry about interviewing somebody. Those are the kinds of questions that you want to be able to ask. The other thing to look into is, once we're talking about the viruses and the vaccines, how prevalent are they? So if your child is getting vaccinated for pertussis or tetanus, I guess, if it goes in that diphtheria, tetanus, pertussis, how prevalent are these things? Hepatitis B, how prevalent is it? What's the chance of my child getting sick with this? Is this something that with good hygiene and clean water that we're not going to have an issue with? Is this something that we see breakouts of a lot? Those kinds of questions are going to be important when trying to decide how you want to handle that. And then what happens if they do get it? Some of these we it's so quick to let's solve the problem. Does the problem really need to be solved? And that is a question only you can answer. Some children are going to handle viruses better than others. And that's just a fact. So, one child can get the flu and be just fine, and another child can get it and they could end up in the hospital. So you have to kind of work through those things too. But what are the chances if my child does get this virus? What are the odds that they're going to get it? And then if they do, what does that look like for them? Those are all things you get to balance and decide. And then if they do get sick with it, like what are the treatment options and what are the side effects? What are the side effects from getting the vaccine? And what are the side effects from getting whatever virus it is? And keeping in mind, too, that even though you get a vaccine for your child, it may or may not stop them from getting the illness. Nothing's 100%. And we see this specifically with the flu vaccine. Some years they get it really on, where that vaccine tends to be the prominent flu that's going around that year. And other years, it's like 10% effective because that's not the flu strains that went around that year. And even with that, you may or may not get it. There's all kinds of, not to go too deep, right? But we've heard things about vaccine shedding and live viruses. So if you're vaccinated with a live virus, then you have a chance of becoming ill from that virus. And then there's vaccine shedding, which if you have a vaccine, then you can spread something to somebody else because of that vaccine, because of having that vaccine. So again, all stuff I'm not going to go over completely here, but those are things to be aware of that you can research on your own. Side effects from the vaccine, I did talk about that. That would be another thing that you want to say, like how often does this occur? What kind of population sees it the most? Is it like weakened immune or something like that? That's something to look into. And then keep in mind that every family is going to interpret this information differently. And that's okay, depending on your family history and life experiences and people that you know. All of that is going to impact how you feel and how you think about this, and that's okay. And so that's why it's important to gather that information and also do the research before making your decision. How about what vaccines are offered to mom during pregnancy and to baby right after birth? So let's talk about the top ones. Again, I'm not going to dive too deep. So let's talk about those top ones so that you know what's coming up for you. Now, during pregnancy, currently the CDC recommends the Tdap and flu shots. And the new one, maybe not recommended by the CDC, but that you are hearing from your providers, is that COVID vaccine. Now, let me state this very clearly for everyone to hear, no matter what side you are on. It is not morally right to test vaccines on pregnant women. So why do any vaccines exist and in a way that we are told that they are safe for pregnant women? Because pregnant women agree to have vaccines, and then once they do that, we gather information on them, and we use that information to backtrack and say, when these vaccines were given during pregnancy, we saw this side effect, whatever, and this is the percentage of whatever we're concerned about. So, and I'm not just saying they're morally wrong. Like, this is like the health community says we don't test vaccines on pregnant women. That's not ethical. So when you are seeing that this or that is safe or whatever, just know that that's how it's done. And as far as new vaccines, it does take quite a while to be able to see what the actual effects are. And so keep that in mind as you're making decisions for yourself and your babes. For baby, it's going to be the hepatitis B. That is the first one that is offered in the hospital. So right after baby's born, they're going to offer your baby a couple of things. Hepatitis B is an immediate within the first 24 hours. They do a vitamin K shot. That is not a vaccine. That is to help with blood clotting, separate conversation. And erythromycin, also not a vaccine. That is an eye ointment antibiotic. Also separate conversation for a different time. But that hepatitis B will be offered within the first 24 hours. And yes, is put into baby if you do not sign a consent that you do not want the vaccine. So that is something, if we've talked about it here before, then you know. And if that's the first time you're hearing it, that would be something that's on your birth plan. If you choose not to have the hepatitis B vaccine, that I would put that on your birth plan so that they know that they don't prick your baby without your consent. Now, Tdap. What is Tdap? The big thing, the reason that they ask women to get it when they are pregnant is for the pertussis. Now, pertussis is that whooping cough, and babies are not vaccinated for that until they are 2 months old when they get that first Tdap vaccine, if that's what you're choosing to do according to the CDC schedule. Tdap is given to moms during pregnancy with the idea that if they do that, those antibodies will be passed on to baby postpartum until they're able to receive that vaccine, that next vaccine. Now, the CDC recommends that they receive it, that moms receive it from their 27th to their 36th week of each pregnancy. And you still obviously get to say yay or nay. Whooping cough is another one of those things where there are different strains of them. So mom might be vaccinated for one and baby, could come in contact with another. It's not extremely uncommon. And so just keep that in mind. And then the other side of that is, yes, you're making some antibodies, but this is the one where parents get very concerned, and that's when they start asking other members of their family or people who are going to visit that if they are not up to date on that Tdap, that they don't want them to visit. And that's why, because it could be all different kinds of strains if that's something that you're very concerned about, and that you get to make that decision. Now, this is according to the CDC. I want you guys to know that the CDC has great information. I do not regard them as the god of anything. They are very good at providing evidence and information, and I appreciate that. But everybody has their opinions about different ways of practicing and different recommendations. So this is straight from the CDC. It says getting Tdap between 27 through 36 weeks of pregnancy lowers the risk of whooping cough in babies younger than 2 months old by 78%. So that would be something to look into their data to see what you're looking for there. The other thing is, if your lifestyle, depending on your lifestyle, are you going to be really in your home for those first couple of months? Are you going to have a lot of visitors? Is it, a sick season? Is it winter time? Are you going to need any kind of childcare, daycare for that baby? What does your lifestyle look like? Are you going to be traveling? Those all play a part in why you make the decisions that you make in regards to that too. The other one is the flu shot. So obviously, well, maybe not obviously, pregnant women are at a higher risk of complication if they have the flu during pregnancy. So obviously our bodies are busy growing a baby and doing all kinds of other things. And so when we get ill with something like that and we are pregnant and our body is hard at work doing all these other things, we can come down a little heavier with something like the flu. From a mom who has had the flu during pregnancy, it's not fun. In my case, it wasn't unbearable, but definitely some food coming back up and looser things coming back down. It's not fun, that's for sure. However, as I had said, since it's a live virus, when you receive that, you might also get ill from it. And they always say it'll be a milder form. I don't know how much I believe on that either way, but sure, that could be true. And so that's an option for you as well. It is, according to them again, it is shown to reduce the risk of flu by 50%. I do believe that it does matter what the strain is. And so that is for you to look into for that season and whatever. But like I said, sometimes it's more effective and sometimes it's less effective. So that would be on you to look into. And again, is it flu season or am I going to come into contact with da-da-da-da-da? All of that will play into your decision making. It's supposed to also help protect the baby from flu until they can be vaccinated themselves. Again, everything has a cause and effect. So if we put something into our bodies, we know that it affects our baby. Sometimes it's in a good way. Sometimes it's in a bad way. Sometimes it's a little of both, or there's a benefit and a risk to it. And so that is absolutely something to consider. We as mothers, I believe, do our very best to be the healthiest, best versions of ourselves that we can while we are preparing for our pregnancy and birth. And so sometimes this doesn't sit right, or it really does sit right. And so that is just a personal thing that you get to decide. And I'm sorry, I can't give you a straight black and white because that is just not how life is. But I do hope that it helps you kind of work through that to understand that it's okay to work through it and not feel cornered into a decision that you're not comfortable with. Now, hepatitis B for baby. This is obviously to protect baby from getting Hep B. It's given to every baby within the US unless it is declined. And it doesn't matter if mom has hepatitis B or of what the risk factors are for them, at least in the ways of the providers offering it or recommending it. So that is for you to decide, right? So if you or your partner have Hep B, if your baby's going to be coming into contact for sure with people that have Hep B, that they'll be preparing food in your home or something like that, where blood or something else could end up mixing, then that is a real concern. Hepatitis B is a liver infection that spreads through the blood, semen, or other bodily fluids. And this is one of those where I do really recommend that you read the insert because it is something that unless your baby is at direct risk for, and maybe I shouldn't even necessarily, it's not like a personal, when you read it, the way that babies, not even babies, the way that it is spread is basically through sexual contact or sharing of like drug needles. And so when you look at that, maybe, and as I said, if you or your partner has it, if somebody close by that's going to be preparing food or, something like they're going to be like handling your baby and stuff, and that that's a thing, then that obviously would be a very real concern. But I do think it's worth looking at the insert and seeing, does this check the boxes for my baby? Or not. And the other side of it is some moms just feel very comfortable, like, no, I know I checked that box and this feels right to me and I want them to have all the protection in the world. And you get to decide on that. The only thing or the other side of it, the thing that I would also say if we're looking at benefits and risks, and this is where like the crunchy mom side of things, where crunchy moms are like, but wait, what about what it does to your gut? What about what it does to your blood? What about these extra ingredients as far as preservation and stuff like that? And so that same thing is where I would say, make sure that you look into that a little bit because absolutely these things, when we put them in our bodies, have an effect on us. But also reading through the manufacturer stuff, reading through the inserts and asking lots of questions and to the right people, not just the ones that are going to, whatever they're thinking, they're going to answer it that way. But that's what I would recommend. So, and that would be like the main one that you have to deal with before your baby leaves the hospital or is offered within the first 24 hours, no matter where you give birth. The next question this kind of poses is, what if I'm not comfortable with some of these vaccines? So what if these things are offered, because they will be at your provider appointments or postpartum for baby? What if you're not comfortable with those? Now, we've talked about doing all the research and stuff. Hopefully, you have a provider that you feel comfortable working through some of these things with. I have been through several pediatricians, and I have been so grateful for the ones that have been, they just take all of my questions, because you know what? I don't have all the answers. And I actually would like somebody's opinion that sees thousands of children during the year and has children of their own. I actually do care about their opinion, as long as they're respectful to me and what I believe or how I'm choosing to raise my kids. I absolutely want to hear their opinion. That's why we go to doctors. So I do think it's really important to be able to have very candid conversations with your providers. And I have gone different directions at different times in my parenting journey and with my children and with providers to help me make educated decisions regarding my children's care. So with that, it's back to make sure you have supportive providers, right? Basically, you need to know you can say yes to everything. You can say no to everything, or you can choose to do your own schedule. You totally get to choose. And the thing is, if you decide to not do something, even at a visit, and decide the next week you would like to do it, guess what? You can bring them right back in and it's no big deal. So keep that in mind as you're making those decisions too. It's not an all or nothing. It doesn't always have to be an all or nothing. You absolutely get to choose what you do for your baby. Now, I hope today's episode helped you a little bit. I hope you were able to take a big breath and say, okay, I understand I have these things coming up I understand that I'm going to have to make decisions on them. I know where to go to get some information and make an informed decision. And I'm going to give myself grace, and it's okay to give myself time in order to do that. Remember that we are all trying to do our best. I would ask that you choose compassion and understanding when you're talking to each other, whether that's on social media or in person, because parenting is hard and we all deserve a little bit of grace with that. And remember that every parent, including yourself, is going to interpret benefits and risks differently, and that's okay. We are all individuals. We're not made to think the same. And we have the opportunity and the responsibility to make those decisions for ourselves and our family. Obviously, I'm a big believer that you deserve to have the very best information so that you can make good decisions for your family. And I, sitting over here, support you no matter what you choose. So if you have no other cheerleaders in your life, I hope that I am your biggest one or one of them. And with that, if you have any questions regarding this episode or any comments, which I'm sure I will get some, please feel free to reach out at hello@myessentialbirth.com or DM me at myessentialbirth. I am not perfect either, and so I'm always willing and grateful to receive comments and feedback so that I can better serve all of you. And with that, I will see you next week. If you loved what you heard today, the very best way to support this podcast and help other moms to find it is to leave a quick review. I read one at the beginning of the episodes, and I would love for yours to be next. And if you're ready for even more pregnancy, birth, and postpartum goodness, come join me in the My Essential Birth course at myessentialbirth.com, where I will hold your hand and walk you through pregnancy and birth step by step so you're totally prepared for a birth you'll love. See you next week.